welcome to another episode of Crypto with English. I'd like to warmly welcome a returning guest, Dr. Sean Manion, the Chief Scientific Officer of Equideum Health, formerly known as Consensus Health. Now, Equideum Health is a Web3 person-centered healthcare and research network, and this is to advance health equity and outcomes, optimizing data liquidity. And we're going to get into the weeds as far as some of the upcoming projects and initiatives. So, Sean, thank you very much for coming back on. I know it's
Thanks
going to
for
be a
having
very
me.
Yes, absolutely. I know it's going to be a very, very exciting year for you, and we definitely covered a lot of ground last time as far as healthcare, life sciences, and the personal data of all of us in this ecosystem. So, Sean, again, thank you very much for coming on.
Great to be here. Thank you for having me. I am usually live from Pittsburgh, but I'm live from Baltimore today. I drove down this morning, so different part of the East Coast.
Right, for sure. And I would suggest to anybody, if you're on LinkedIn, check out Sean Manion. He has an incredible profile picture of a falcon perched on his forearm, almost akin to what you'd see in these old paintings from the Middle Ages. It's it's very poignant. I love it.
That's always good to go have a falcon with you wherever you go. You never know when you're going to need it. Probably easier to do in the metaverse than it is in the real world, but we can talk about that too.
Yes, absolutely. So, could you talk about Equideum Health? So, talk about some of the rebranding and some of the projects that are on the horizon for this year.
Certainly, and as you mentioned, the Equideum Health is a rebranding that we've done for our organization, which was originally Consensus Health, just in January of 2022. Consensus Health was incubated from 2018 inside Consensus, which those who know the crypto space understand the Consensus was started by Joe Lubin, who's one of the co-founders of Ethereum, sort of an R&D shop turned into a business. Lots of half $500 million gone into R&D for a lot of different projects, a lot of different things that have spun off of there. Our particular focus on health was inside there for a while, but the differences between fintech and gaming and a lot of the other applications and health led our CEO and founder Heather Flannery to talk with Joe and basically say, hey, we need to spin out it as an independent entity so that we can operate in a different regulatory environment, a different data environment, a different cultural environment of healthcare and life sciences, and he agreed. And so we did so in March of 2020. In January of 2022, we rebranded from Consensus Health to Equideum Health. And there were a couple of reasons for that. One, like any kid, we wanted to stand on our own and be able to we are still a part of the Consensus Mesh family. We're still a partner within that environment and have great reach to a lot of other people who've done great work with the technology that we build on, and some of the things that have been done for other industries allow us to not start from scratch, but to build and modify them for healthcare. And we can talk about that a little bit down the line. But Equideum Health was the new name, one, to indicate that we are focused on health equity, focused on data liquidity, but still, primarily focused on Ethereum. And so we are not exclusive to, but that is one of the main areas of connection that we have with Consensus and the rest of the Consensus Mesh family. The Equideum Health brand, though, is also to give a sense that we've moved beyond just blockchain. We like to say blockchain is necessary but not sufficient to transform healthcare because of the differences in aspects of regulatory environment. It really is necessary to put privacy, put confidential computing first, and that can come in a lot of different flavors, hardware and software, from trusted execution environments. And we work with Microsoft and Intel and some of the solutions they have, to software solutions like homomorphic encryption and zero knowledge proof. So those combined with blockchain, and then also decentralized AI, a key component of not only the Web3 world, but what we think will be transformational for healthcare. No longer centralizing data, but leaving data decentralized, deploying the compute, deploying the queries, deploying the algorithms to the data, and leaving the data securely and privately in place so that you get derived data back, but you never expose more than is necessary. Those three families of technology, blockchain, decentralized AI, and confidential computing, really are the foundation for what we're bringing to healthcare and life sciences. And we think the necessary elements to go from what has been very positive but very slow moving incremental advances in health tech over the last 30 years, but sometimes they fall short. We're still using fax machines in the United States. Let's put it simply: billions, if not hundreds of billions of dollars have gone into health tech innovation. We're still using fax machines. And people can wave their hands and say it's the regulatory environment. But it's the environment that we need to get past. So if you can't figure out how to move past the fax machine, maybe you need to do something differently. And we think that difference is going to come from the combination of blockchain and some of the power it can bring, both from an auditing perspective, a provenance perspective, as well as the incentivization perspective it can bring. Also, the decentralized AI, not trying to take these increasingly large amounts of health data and centralize them. If you're going to get personalized data about somebody for their health and health relevant data, how are you going to always have that in the same place, centralized for a doctor or a researcher?
Right.
If you can decentralize that, that becomes much more effective. And then, of course, you need that privacy or that confidential compute to ensure regulatory compliance. And we even include a consent component that was a group, Fireblocks, FHIR, Fast Health Interoperability Resources, Fireblocks, that we acquired in December, and their blockchain-based consent solution, which is already up on the Microsoft Azure Marketplace, becomes the foundation for people being able to control access to their own data, consent to its use, and with a fine-grained consent, withdraw that consent if they want. And we find that to be a more ethically sound, but also regulatory compliant and quality ensuring way about the data. And that really all factors into what we think is the future transformation of healthcare and life sciences.
Wow. And first and foremost, I have to say, this is a very Herculean and admirable mission that you and your team at Equideum are undertaking as far as transforming and addressing and resolving these various issues and problems within healthcare. And in fact, one could say there's, in fact, a certain degree of more complex obstacles within healthcare, actually, as far as scaling and resolving a lot of these issues than certain other industries. And by the way, not to minimize, let's say, other industries, however, but I do feel healthcare does have a unique set of issues and circumstances that aren't necessarily seen elsewhere. So just to unpack, some of what you said, I've come across this term health equity a few times as, across my research, looking at, healthcare, looking at, blockchain and Web3 and kind of the interplay with all these things. So to a lay person, how would you describe or define health equity?
That's a very good question, and I've learned a lot from our VP of social impact and population health, who is Dr. Pierre Vigilance, who's spent a lot more time on the topic than I have, and it is the case that sometimes that term gets thrown around a little bit too loosely, and people pepper it on things to try and just make it sound like they're doing something that's got social impact to it. But really, what it comes down to is that there are disparities within health. There are outcome differences for different groups and different individuals within those groups, in a way that there should not be. And the system, for a variety of reasons, has been set up in a way that doesn't give everybody the same chance at outcome. And health equity speaks to getting everybody to similar outcomes, to similar positive advances. And there are going to be individuals that are further behind, and just getting them a step up in the system that doesn't allow them to move ahead as quickly isn't always necessarily the best way. And so figuring out how you do move populations and different populations, but also individuals in specific, to the positive health outcomes that we all can share. That really is where health equity comes to play. And within health tech, a lot of that comes down to digital equity and digital inclusion. If you come up with an app that helps people get healthier, well, that's great for those people who have a phone and can run that app or have the understanding and the comfort level with it. But that's not going to be everybody. So how do you even go further and find the right type of foundational advance to bring other people up to speed on these newer technologies that can help those who are already within the system. There's a lot of people who are outside of the system. There are those who aren't insured, who are underinsured, and making sure that we're looking at those individuals who are left behind for whatever reason is something that we have an emphasis on.
Yeah, and I like the term you threw in there as far as defining and explaining equities, similar outcomes. I would imagine that having a robust and healthy, efficient healthcare system where everybody does have similar outcomes, I would say that is probably one of the cornerstones of you could say a modern and you could say progressive, forward-moving society. I'm wondering though, there's always a fair amount of apathy, anywhere, whether it's tech or or other industries. What would you say to somebody who says, well, why do we need this? And let me go into that a little bit. Having essentially sovereignty and almost access and a decentralized system with everybody's information with a high level of security and confidentiality. Maybe maybe some sort of apathetic person would be like, why should that matter to me? Where I am as I am standing. So to say. Because I've come across like some of these arguments when I've tried to explain like blockchain to other people. Like, oh, well, why does this matter? And I'm like, well, look at the problems today, and this is how blockchain could address X, Y, and Z. So yeah, to that question, I'm wondering, have you come across things like that? And what would your thoughts be, as a rebuttal?
It's a great question, and really it's a question that's a moving target. I've seen this discussed in a lot of different places in the past. Almost 6 years now that I've been in the blockchain and healthcare space. Well, who wants to have control of their own data, or some people will say ownership of their own data, or control access to their own data? Well, I think today it is not 0% of the population, but it's also not 100% of the population. And I think today it's a greater percent of the population than it was 5 years ago when I first started having these conversations. And so, what is it? And also, what will it become as people become more comfortable with things? That's to be determined. It could go back to in when Amazon first started selling books online. What percentage of people wanted to buy books online? Probably not that high a percentage. What percentage of people buy stuff online now, books and more? Well, a pretty high percentage of the population. Still not everybody, but to not anticipate change in that interest, in that capacity, in that comfort level is to stagnate. Well, there's not enough people today. Okay, well, what is the incentives towards that? Why would it be beneficial for them? And I think of it, I'm a scientist at heart, so I think of it in the form of a taxonomy. Well, you can take a taxonomy of people who visit museums or people who go to certain types of establishments and think about what are their motivations for that. And you can do the same thing for this. What is the taxonomy of people who currently or in the future state may want to be able to control their own data or control their own health data and have it be something they grant access to and get compensated for, which is what we're setting up. And there are going to be some people who might like to be empowered by that. There are going to be some people who might like to just in principle get something as a reward for their data. There are some people who it depends on the dollar amount that they might be interested or not. There are others who, for altruistic reasons, might be interested in putting that data out there so it answers questions for research that goes to improving the human condition overall. And then there are those who might be interested from a novelty perspective. There's more you could put into that, but you start to add up what are these different reasons people may want to do this, and what percentage have that now, what percentage when they know more about it would want to do that. That's what we're looking at. And I don't have those hard and fast numbers. I haven't had the chance to do a full market analysis of it yet. It would be interesting to see. But in the pieces that I've seen other people do in the literature that I've gone through, I think we're if we haven't gotten to 50% of the population, we're moving towards it when you can educate them on what it is that they are able to do and educate them on the possibilities that are out there. So, I might not conceive that I could control my own data. or that I could be the one who's empowered to have that to say, yes, this research can use my data. But when we see things like moving away from healthcare, but oftentimes other data is health relevant, social determinants of health data. When you see something like Cambridge Analytica, that happened with the 2016 election, all of a sudden people said, wait a second, my data is being used for purposes I don't like. And oftentimes your data is being used for purposes you don't like and being used to manipulate your behaviors. This is what a lot of different activity on the internet is doing right now. Once people recognize that that's the fact, all of a sudden they say, wait a second, would it be better if I had control of my own data, if I knew who was using it, if I knew I was going to get compensated for, and then you get that percentage that grows even further. So I think we're going to see a continued movement towards people wanting to have that empowerment. Now, does everybody want to be bothered with every little detail? Well, yes, no, maybe we'll find out. Most people would like to know what's in their bank account. They would like to be able to access that information at some point. They don't want to let their financial information just be used by others and them not have an understanding of it or being used for their own benefit. Could the same be true for healthcare? I think it is the case. You can also move to the case that, can you make it interesting? I know people who know more about the statistics and the health of football players for fantasy football reasons than they do their own healthcare. Well, what if you had that same granularity where you understood down to the yardage what someone did on any given Sunday, and instead took that same interest and put it into an interesting app, giving you the opportunity to advance, giving you the opportunity to be rewarded in health? Could that make people as interested in their own health data? I think it could. It also I often point to fantasy football when people say, "Oh, people don't understand statistics and numbers," and they do if they want to. And that's an incentivization aspect. And of course, when you get to blockchain, what does blockchain do in a way that other technologies don't? It can incentivize.
That's a very good point. I really do like the comparison, especially when it comes to fantasy football, because I can talk to my friends and they'll know which player tore their ACL which year. But as far as maybe knowing their own blood type, some don't know. So that is actually a very excellent point. And I can only imagine, at this point in time, as you and I are speaking, how much of our own personal information has been monetized by third parties, without our knowledge, and, without us ever, for the most part, may not ever know. And thinking that, if there is a decentralized framework where I can manage and you could say have some sort of supervision over the way my own information is handled, I look at that as very, very promising. And let's say if I want to contribute that to various research and perhaps in exchange for a fee or maybe not a fee, I can choose to do that as well.
And that's the system we are trying to set up. There is a system of data exchange out there, and there's a system of data access, and there's a system of data selling, a marketplace that exists. It's legal, but it is increasingly coming under scrutiny and increasingly being questioned, both from a privacy perspective, but also from a who's getting the reward perspective. I think, not to call anybody out, but it's in the news. Twitter got fined $150 million recently for misuse of people's private data. And they're not the only ones. They're just, a popular company that, is out there and got dinged. Google and the National Health System in the UK have a class action lawsuit against them because people were going in, they were, their health data was being collected. Someone in the hospital system decided they would sell that to Google, money into the hospital. That seems like a good thing. Google made an algorithm, sells that back as a clinical decision support to hospital systems. And all of a sudden people said, wait a second, shouldn't I get a cut of that? Didn't I contribute to that in some way? What we have today with health data is effectively, it's like a feudal system. If you recall from history, in a very broad brush, feudal system was, you lived on land and you were able to use that land and produce enough food for you and your family if you were lucky. But there was someone who was a feudal lord over that, and everyone else was the serfs, and taxes and product and goods went to that feudal lord who owned the land and effectively owned the labor of the land and the results of that labor. And if you think about it now, that's what's happening with healthcare data. Someone else is taking your data and monetizing it. And sure, you get to live on the land, you might get some healthcare in there, but is it possible to have that transformed? And I don't mean to say it in a disparaging way. That just really is how things have developed as data has become much more important and prominent over recent years. And we're only now thinking about how could this be different? And it could be, and we like to advance the idea that your health data and your data in general is effectively akin to your labor. And so now, you can with your labor in countries that aren't inclined to just have centralized state ownership of the labor, you can get monetized for your labor. And there's all sorts of unevenness and inequities in that, and it's areas that still need to be worked on and fixed. But it does allow people to say, hey, if I'm going to work for X individual, that labor is something that I get paid for. And can you get paid for that data? Can we have your data, like your labor, be something that you have some sort of reward for if people are going to use it for further gain? That's possible, and it isn't a path that's easy, and it may be a path that doesn't have a perfect model to go after, but the current state of things is far, far worse. And so I always remind people when they say, well, the labor market isn't perfect, therefore you shouldn't think that way. Well, the labor market might not be perfect, but we're not living in a feudal system anymore, at least in most of the countries on Earth. And so there are advances that we have made, and those advances could be represented in how we see data, in how people are rewarded for their data, in their own ability to control access to that data. Those are the types of things that I think we're going to see, not only in a Web 3.0 world overall, but really specifically to the transformation of health in a way that makes health data more accessible to researchers in a cleaner way, in a consented way, which allows a lot more effective use and allows more signal than noise in the research, and that feeds back into advancing health outcomes and knowledge translation.
Wow. That is a very, very excellent example, and I love the historical context you threw in there about the fiefdoms and serfdoms. It's almost like taking the serf and maybe making that individual a yeoman, so to say, a free person. So maybe they can perhaps travel as they please and purchase land and resources, as they please as well. And looking at it based on your explanation, the serf example is very, very apt, very, very appropriate if you were to look at like either Twitter or Instagram or some of the other major platforms as essentially the local lord or fiefdom. Many of us, let's say individual users, are essentially the serfs on that land, and like you said, we're able to use that land or use that platform, so to say. But the labor being our information, we virtually have no say in that. And there's virtually no traceability or accountability as far as much of it stands today. So that is very, very very well said. And as far as the metaverse, so there's no hard and fast date as far as I think when society as a whole starts to migrate and in many ways experience some sort of mass adoption. But where do you see the metaverse and Equideum and kind of this Web3 transformation over the next few years?
Well, I think the metaverse and it is something that we're still getting our heads around what it is. There's something that fits into the general definition that's already occurring, even if you look at what's happening with certain video games and places where people interact virtually and have virtual systems that have longitudinality and time dependency and interaction with other individuals, organizations, and other parts of virtual world. So it's not just a closed virtual space of walking through a video game, but it instead has aspects of the real world within that virtual world. That is taking shape, and we can talk until we run out of breath on what the definitions of those things are. And there are some people who like to do it, and bless them for it. You see that in every place. The jargonists, I call them. I worked in traumatic brain injury, and you have people who could talk for days on what the proper definition of a concussion is. But honestly, that's not helping anybody who's got a concussion or something like a concussion, or whether a mild TBI is a concussion, or whether there's subconcussive issues that can culminate in something that's similar to concussive issues with regard to memory, or you can keep going and going. But you can at one point decide whether you're in the general realm of concussion versus someone who's just sitting there and nothing has hit their head. Metaverse for me is similar. There's definitely, me walking out in the sunshine, unless we're in a simulation, which I'm not going to discount entirely, but is not me in the metaverse, but me interacting with individuals in some other virtual world. I'm not a Roblox player, but I know that's one of the most popular ones on the planet right now. Those become aspects of the metaverse. And so the question is then, where will that go? What types of things will happen in there? What's important in there? Some groups are looking how can they market themselves in there, but it starts to be where you start to think about health in there is a different thing entirely. Even from, can you identify health problems by people's behavior in the metaverse? If someone is regularly playing an online gaming system where reaction time of them in a group is notable, and all of a sudden you see a significant drop in their reaction time, is that as significant as noting that someone you're playing soccer with on a field all of a sudden can't run as quickly or doesn't react as quickly when you kick the ball to them, and they may have some sort of problem, and it might be an indicator? Well, yes, it is. And is there a way you can identify problems there? Of course there is. We don't have the systems for that yet, but that could be looked at. And I've seen some training, some military training, and some other groups that are looking at that exact type of use case for the metaverse and health. But there are other things you could have. There are a number of mental health issues that across the planet that have worsened with COVID, and a lot of the lockdowns and a lot of the reactions to COVID have worsened these, and we're seeing that more and more. And so, are there areas? There's stigma to mental health issues. There's hesitancy to go and get treatment for mental health issues. Could there be a way that you could identify mental health problems in individuals in the metaverse, or is there a way to give them a portal to some sort of talking to a virtual clinician in that environment? That's another thing that I've seen people looking at, and might be another use case. But really, what it comes down to is, there's a statement. And I'm gonna blank on the individual who said it, but he's the CEO of a company called Red 6. I was down at South by Southwest recently, and I really liked how he framed it. He said the metaverse is simply layer upon layer of our data moving through virtual space. And if you think about it, how you are represented in the metaverse is really just a collection of data. And sometimes it is generic data, whether it's an avatar for a video game that just has a generic avatar that it allows you. But sometimes it's personalized, and that personalization can be unique to that particular environment, or it can be representational of you as an individual. If I select a particular gender or a particular say height to my avatar in that is similar to me in the real world, then it's representational. But you can also represent yourself in different ways, and that's its own area of discussion. But if you move through space, or if you move through a virtual space with information about you being represented, connections to things that you're saying, or things that or things that you're able to do, they're representative of the data about you elsewhere. All of a sudden, you have the ability to look at how data about you is known, is shared, is represented in different environments. What's controlling that data? Who can collect that data? How is that data utilized? That's something that having empowerment to be able to control, so that people don't use your data or misrepresent you is something that's important. The idea of digital twins, of having something that's close to the representation of me exist in a digital space. One for assessment from a clinical point of view, two in silico trials or trials that are happening in silicon that are happening in computers. These can be enhanced by having a digital twin component that allows certain things to be demonstrated on that digital twin, saving me from risk of personal injury or problems, and expanding upon what can be known or what can be suggested about a health issue that I have, or how I would respond to certain types of stress, or what type of recommendation to modulate that stress for my particular makeup could be done. If you are able to do that, someone can take that from you and utilize your representation and monetize it, or misrepresent how you are conducting yourself so that you get blamed for it in an environment that's now increasingly shared by a larger and larger percent of the population. So being able to control, have the sense of autonomy, have the sense of sovereignty around the data about you in the metaverse is really becomes a core factor. And there's an identity component to that. There's a consent component to that. And there's aspects that are very similar to what we are utilizing to transform healthcare. As you think about the metaverse, if everything about you is representational of some health relevant thing, that becomes like health data, and that data can be collected. That data can be utilized by you and your providers to make more specific precision medicine recommendations. And so, shouldn't that environment be addressed or approached in a similar way that you do your own health data? And we think that is the case. We think it's nascent for that comprehensive solution to take place. But if we can start to get people to collect more and more of their own data, or not collect, but basically make available with their own consent and with their own control data about them, you can get closer to precision medicine, but you can move into a virtual metaverse that allows for in silico trials, allows for representation of you in that metaverse route, allows for different ways of being in that metaverse to be controlled by, empowered by, and maintained by you. And that self, that individual empowerment really is the core between what's happening in the metaverse and what can be happening with not just virtual health, but with all health information. As I was thinking off the top of my head there, that was a little bit messy, but I'm hoping I can weave together a few points. It really is that nascent a conversation. I've seen some people talking about it. I've seen some people dismissing it, which, okay, if you don't want to have the conversation, if it hurts your brain, that's okay. But not having the conversation is just going to create pockets of exploitation of mostly young people.
Very well said.
Which I think we should be working to avoid. And it's going to take a little bit of sorting out before we are sure exactly where and what within the metaverse is something that does need to be connected to self, and how it can be connected to self in a privacy preserving way is also very important, because you don't just want to put everything about you out there.
Right. And by the way, that was an excellent explanation. And going off of that, what are your feelings about gamification of partially or completely of, you could say, the healthcare experience within a metaverse setting? So, for instance, since I was a little kid and, Commodore 64, Atari, Nintendo, and all that stuff, there's been vast research of essentially positive feedback and reward systems that are essentially manifested throughout the video gaming experience. So, taking this into this Web3 metaverse context, how do you feel about, let's say, this journey or executing certain functions as a user, as a participant, as a patient, throughout the, I guess you could say, throughout this metaverse healthcare, blockchain-based system? Because I'm thinking to myself, and especially when you mentioned fantasy football, the amount of detail people will automatically learn and memorize about their favorite players, but yet know very little about their own, personal health, like, blood type. I still know plenty of people who don't know, their own blood type, for instance. So, imagine, if this is, let's say, a hospital, and let's say this hospital uses a blockchain metaverse ecosystem where, let's say you could create your own avatar and you could navigate with either, different individuals or even access, different types of data, either about yourself or about maybe specialists or staff you need to see. I'm thinking to myself, like, if there's actually some sort of gaming element to this, maybe the amount of detail might actually, yeah, yeah, might actually start heading in that direction for once, where people are like, oh, this is kind of fun. Now I want to learn even more about myself, and I feel like maybe gaming might get people there.
Yeah, and apologize. I've got
No
I'm visiting people in Baltimore, so I've got some people here as well. But it is the case that the challenge is what is the intention? If people are trying to capture and pool your data for their own purposes versus gamification or motivation or incentivization for you to do things that create data that then enhance their ability to tell you what's wrong with you from a health perspective, or tell you what might be better for you to improve your health. That I think is the key difference. I mean, the gamification or incentivization is something that can be used against you and can be used for you. And that's where giving people empowerment of that data that is created about them is so important. And I think that's where the crux is. We like to stress when we talk to people, we don't want your data. Don't want your data. Don't want to hold your data. We want to make the ecosystem that allows you to have control of that data, and you can grant access or revoke that access to other individuals. That for us is important, because if you are trying to create a system where people create data about themselves and then you take that data and you monetize it for yourself, that's where there's exploitation. I think that's where there's a problem. And let's face it, that's currently the environment. And maybe it's not a malicious exploitation. It's people seeing opportunities and not realizing they're taking something from somebody else that has value and could have value for that individual, and they've just decided to monetize it because that's the world we currently live in. But if we can move towards you in that environment creating data, being incentivized to create that data, to know that data, to understand more about yourself. These are the things that might be able to enable you to have empowerment over that. And those individuals who help you, be it a provider or be it a researcher, getting access to that data then becomes a beneficial thing for you and for society. And I think that's where the distinction lies. So I think the gamification and the incentivization is okay as long as it's towards something that benefits you with your knowledge and your consent, rather than something that benefits somebody else and is simply exploitative.
And by the way, as a general question, you've got the gears turning in my head now. How vulnerable is our personal, medical information on any, given day? And, this could either be to hackers, this could be to even just pure, personal negligence, of the staff member or the custodian of the information, and also even accounting things too. If you have to travel, and if you're very sick, or if you, sustain an injury, sometimes I would imagine, you forget things when being examined, by the nurse or the physician. So, whether it's like an allergy, for instance, and if, let's say, if you forget to disclose that because, let's say, you have a concussion, you're getting treated, and let's say the attending nurse asks you some of these questions, people may forget these things. And since there isn't a centralized, I guess you could say, repository where these things can be, easily accessed, it kind of makes me wonder, like, our information is kind of, it doesn't really have a lot of, safeguards at any given time. That's my feeling. Just, kind of thinking about your explanation and kind of the way things have been, and, keeping in mind these various incidents like, Cambridge Analytics and Facebook and whatnot. Things are not as, I guess you could say, as safe as one may think when it comes to this.
And that definitely is a challenge. The first challenge is, where is that information about you? If every time I go to the doctor, I have to remember my entire medical history, that's going to be a challenge. I'm going to get things wrong, forget things. Self-report is generally a little bit unreliable. But it's also the case that there's so much information that is relevant that we're really not even carrying with us. I mean, I could carry my paper medical records with you, and in some places, and folks in the military have to do this frequently, and in some countries it's quite common. But even that's a limited amount of information about you, and has risks and has challenges and is long to go through. A minority of information in your medical record, the information in your medical record is a minority of the information that's impactful on your health. Things like environments, things like social determinants, things like genetics, these are going to impact a majority of what your health is. And so getting all of that data aligned about you and in one place so that a doctor can make the best decisions about you, or if there's a researcher who's doing population research, that's an increasingly impossible thing to do. It's too costly. It's too risky to have all that data consolidated into a single honeypot. And so if you want to be able to do that federated approach that I mentioned earlier, being able to leave data at rest and being able to send the compute, whether it's a query or whether it's an algorithm being trained, to the data wherever it may sit. And the data about you may sit on 5 or 6 different large servers along with a bunch of other edge devices. All of these things can contribute to the best precision personalized medicine about you, the best decision making on what is wrong with you, and the best decision making on the course of treatment for you. But getting the connection to all of that is almost impossible in the current environment for a single physician in a clinic or in a hospital system if you've gone to multiple places and all this other data sits outside of the electronic health record. But if you can connect it all to your own personal private cloud, which is what we are presenting as the option for individuals, veterans being the first group that we're working with, but other individuals for what we call health utility grids in different geographies. Those are the things that allow an individual to say, well, here's all the data about me. It's in my personal private cloud. It's connected at a server at this hospital here. It's sitting at a clinic here. But I can grant access to an individual who wants to be able to come in and look at it if they're a physician, if they're a researcher. But that access is only limited to them querying it and getting the derived data back, not getting whole copies of it from me. And then it's also the case that consent or that ability for them to use it is time dependent, and it can be revoked by me if I find out they're doing things that I didn't think they were going to be doing. So all of that system allows for more data about you to be available, but also allows you the privacy and protection of not having your data just out there being copied. And of course, besides the incentivization component of blockchain, it's the perfect audit layer. The transactions of millions of users of Bitcoin are known by absolutely everybody who's downloaded the record, and there's an immutability to what has been done, and people can trust that. Well, the transactions records of where your health data is, who's touched that health data, what was it collected by, whom was it collected by, all of that impact how that data is utilized. And the data is much different than in finance or in fintech. A dollar is a dollar, a Bitcoin is a Bitcoin. My blood pressure reading might be important, especially over longitudinal time, but I'm doing it myself, or there was a trained physician who took it, or someone who did it very meticulously for a research study. Each of those are going to have different qualities. So knowing how it was taken, what was the device it was taken on, when was the last time the device was calibrated, if it's connected to a computer, what was the operating system, all of this fabric of confidence. And there is something called a data confidence fabric that we're utilizing to layer over individuals' data. These are things that matter when it comes to health data in a way that didn't before. So really being able to connect all your data and have a physician or a researcher connect to all your data with your permission, being able to understand where that data came from and its quality, and then of course being able to keep that data secure and private is all components of what really is necessary in the future we're heading towards.
Right. Well, I have to say, with what Equideum and you and your team are doing, I think is very admirable. And I think without this solution, the costs of healthcare and the risks are only going to increase with time unless we have some sort of foolproof, surgically accurate, forgive the pun, you could say repository of data that can essentially be efficiently harnessed and maintained and also activated and accessible, when needed, because otherwise, you almost have I guess what we currently have now. We're essentially almost relying on, really, I guess, in good faith of the parties that we are interacting with, and we're kind of relying and trusting on a lot of unverified actors and factors within the system. I hope that, let's say, the either it's the intern or the attending nurse or physician, I hope that they're taking their notes accurately. I hope they've interpreted what I've said accurately, so it reflects as such within the medical records and things like that. And even if there is a mistake, it would behoove us all to be able to trace and track that mistake as well. I think one can say that the cost of healthcare seem to only escalate and drastically increase over time. So data, I think, is going to be one of the silver bullets that's going to greatly mitigate and resolve a lot of those problems. So listen, Sean, I wanted to say thank you very much for coming on today. This was very, very informative, and thank you for coming back on as well as a returning guest. I had a wonderful time last time going into the nuances of which we're working on, and I'm very excited to see what Equideum Health has in store for all of us this year. And I'm looking forward to seeing you and your team really transform healthcare as we know it, and be one of the pioneers behind it.
Awesome. No, I love being here. Thank you for having me. Great to continue the conversation, and we can keep on going too, because I'm sure in several months' time there will be new iterations. We've just started work with Nokia and Nokia Bell Labs on an exchange to allow data to be accessed and to have a functional value put on it within that exchange without the data moving. And that work we're doing with Nokia, and then Nokia, they purchased Bell Labs about 6 or 7 years ago. Bell Labs being historically, one of the foundational transformational technology organizations in the world. They're doing amazing things, and so we've partnered with them on how edge devices can have their data be part of an algorithm training or part of querying for research, yet never reveal that data and never have to move that data into somebody else's centralized database. And so that would be very exciting for bringing more pieces of data about a person to bear for health. And so we're excited to talk more on some of those as they advance as well. So we can pick this up in another 6 months or so. And
I was just going to suggest that. Yes. Thank you. Yeah, I'll definitely reach out to you again later this year, and let's make it an event. And I'm very much looking forward to hearing about all the developments.
Awesome. This has been great. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. And I'll talk to you soon.
Take care.